over the past week and a half, I've had kind of a lot of changes. I moved across the country, so a lot of my time in the past week has been spent kind of getting stuff situated. But now that I'm settled in, I think it's time for me to get back onto my Townscaper schedule. Okay, and now let's just make kind of a nice, relaxed build. I think I'm going to do just like a rainbow city. No kind of gimmick, no theme. I mean, apart from this color scheme, um, I'm just gonna kind of sit back, relax, and build. You know, I always do kind of round shapes for my cities, kind of starting in one central area and then going out pretty equidistant in every direction. But I think it might be cool to make kind of like a, not quite a long shape, but at least something kind of interesting that's not just a totally round or totally square shape. So I think I might do kind of like an S or something, snaking through. That could look really cool. I really wanted to make a lot of interesting features just on the island itself because I think that when you do that kind of thing, it lends itself to some really interesting crafting later on. Like the shapes that you make on top of these super unique niche areas end up being, I think, more interesting than they would be otherwise. If they were just in the middle of a big flat plain or something like that. One thing I noticed when I was doing this is that a lot of my shapes end in the five-sided point areas. Like you can see here, here, here. I kind of try to do something which I don't typically do. I try to actually avoid these squares because usually I think they look kind of complex and ugly. But this time I really leaned into the shapes and kind of tried to integrate them as much as possible into my design, which makes the whole situation look a little bit more fort-like. It looks like these maybe were defenses at one point where people with guns or cannons or whatever stood at these corners. And so that kind of gave me the idea to make it um, a bunch of different, not warring sections of the city, but I can kind of imagine maybe back in the day there was some big mega civil war or something on this island where each of the cities, which is a different color and had its own character, decided to fight the other one, or I guess was defending itself against the other ones, or at least building forts and things like that to defend against the other ones. And so each neighborhood, I can probably start out with a fort area, and then from there I can kind of expand into the kind of the neighborhood around it. So yeah, let's begin with that. So this neighborhood over here on this peninsula, one good location for the fort would probably be either there or there. Um, so maybe because they have to defend from internal as well as external enemies, the forts are spaced pretty far apart from each other. So I know that I probably want a fort here or here maybe on this section of the city, and so the nearest fort should be a little bit further away from that, just so they're equidistant around the island. So the fort can be kind of on this corner here. Now what's a good shape for that? I might want to leave this here to kind of imagine the platform where cannons and things like that are, but let's call this the red section, and let's build a wall around here. And you know, the island isn't very big, so I should probably keep the forts to a pretty small size. I can make them tall, but I won't make them very large. Cool. Okay, that's fort number one. I wonder, maybe I can make a flat platform up here, so that can be another defense area where there can be guns and things like that. Let's see. Oh yeah, that looks good. Sweet. Okay, great. So that's fort number one. That's a really hefty fort. Um, okay, and then let's go into fort number two. So fort number two can be maybe guarding the mouth to this harbor area. It looks like this is the only harbor in the game. This right here, I don't really know what it's called when a harbor has two entrances. I don't think it's a harbor. Um, I mean, it probably has pretty calm water on the inside just because this big island here blocks a lot of the current. But this here is clearly the best, most enclosed harbor area because it only has one entrance, and the entrance is kind of, you know, these two sides kind of lean in like this. So the next fort can be right here to guard the harbor entrance. And that can even be a little bit further inland. And if that's red, let's see, if that's red, maybe I'd want, see, it's hard to make a gradient around the whole thing. Well, I guess that can be white because that is kind of away from the gradient of the rest of the islands. So if that's red, maybe there can be kind of a yellow or orange section in the middle, and then this can be a yellow fort over here. This fort can be a little bit further back from the coast. Are these forts too big? I mean, are they totally dominating the landscape? You know what? I think that's fine. I think that's kind of a cool character. And at the end of the what am I saying? At the end of the day, I can always add land on the side of these areas if I want to make the city larger relative to these forts, just so they don't totally dominate. You know, maybe this fort can be a little bit shorter, a little bit taller on the side facing the ocean, a little bit shorter on the side, just because it's not as much of a priority to guard in this direction, maybe. Perfect, okay. So that's the yellow fort, and then I should probably go maybe green, then blue, or maybe this should be green, this should be blue. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go green and then the blue. So the green area, maybe the green, they can control this island as well as this peninsula. So maybe they have, for some reason, they think that this strait here is really important. And so if they want to guard that strait, you know, maybe the reason they hold this little peninsula here is because the fort is on it. So the fort is weirdly away from the rest of this part of the city, but it still kind of is a big connector from the island to the mainland. So let's build. What kind of shape should that be? I guess I'm kind of imagining there's some kind of trade that usually goes through here, just because these people probably want to get from this island over to the mainland. So maybe the fort can be built in two parts, one on the left side, one on the right side. And then the path between the two parts, there's not really any good path between these two sections of the city. I mean, I guess there's this right here, yeah, so I can build out like this. And then we'll build up. Cool, okay, so that's that fort right there. And then this is the little walkway, and you know, maybe, should this be a strait, or should it be a bridge? I'll figure that out later. Let's see how it looks with a bridge. You know, I'll just say it's a bridge, and I can pretend that it's like the bridge can come kind of up and down to let people in and out. Okay, so that's the green section, and then the blue section is going to be over here. And you know, the blue section, maybe they're a little bit less hardcore than everybody else. They're kind of on the end. Nobody really wants their territory because they're not really between anything or anything else. I'm even imagining that the mainland of whatever other countries next door is over here, and then maybe over here is kind of the middle of the ocean. And so the blue territory is not super important because it just doesn't have that much geographic significance. So these people, their tower, honestly can be more decorative, kind of a vanity thing. So that can be right on the edge. Let's get some tall spires. Maybe. Okay, so this fort is very aesthetically pleasing. It's kind of an interesting tourist attraction. Looks great right on the edge of the water, but practically, it's not a super great fort. Which is okay because these people are kind of casual, and maybe these can be hollow right there, just to make it a little bit more interesting. I kind of like the towers. It makes it a little bit more realistic, I think, as if it's even realistic in the first place. But whatever. What if I do this? No, that looks too top heavy. And then in the next section of the city, I think this is going to be the final one. I think it's kind of separate from this color scheme over here, so I think this should probably be white, basically, or neutral colors at least. And this is a really interesting area, because this whole section right here is symmetrical, and then the fort, or what looks like a perfect place for a fort, is kind of right on the side. Now, I guess this area isn't great because, well, it's hard to have a fort over here because if these people are, fighting with these people as well as fighting people on the outside, there's no good location for a fort between on the inside or on the outside of the island. So maybe what I can say is this is some shared cultural space. Maybe it's the oldest part of the island or something, or maybe it's a religious heritage site or something like that. But basically, everybody on the island respects it, and nobody wants to take it as their own property. So maybe it's kind of like, maybe it's like the Vatican a little bit. I mean, I don't really know what Italy was like with all the little warring kingdoms and stuff like that, but let's just pretend it's like that. So it's kind of this special place in this mega culture here, even though there are sub-branches of the culture in different kind of sections of the island. Okay, so this fort maybe can be maybe a lower fort, because a lot of my forts so far have been based around big towers. This one can kind of be a more stout, more low-key. Ooh, actually, that does not look... See, okay, so the game makes it... It gives it a roof that kind of lines up with that wing, but then... Or a wall that lines up with that wing, but then not with that wing, which I don't love. What if I went higher? No, same problem. Okay, maybe, maybe that's okay. Maybe this can just be kind of a weird... it's probably a really old fort, and so it wasn't really built with aesthetics in mind. It was just total functionality, and so it's got kind of a weird shape. It's not super intimidating, but that's okay, because it was probably built like, 1,000 years ago or something crazy like that. Okay, so let's start building the city components. I'm kind of imagining that the oldest part of each city is right around the tower. Or actually, no, the tower, the fort is so big, here at least, that it wouldn't really make sense for it to be the oldest building, just because why would they build one mega fort as their very, very first building? They probably would build it over time. And so maybe originally they were on this peninsula, the fort was on this peninsula, and so the oldest part of the city's here, and then as they expanded in this direction, then they decided to build the big fort here as kind of the world globalized or whatever, and it was just getting more attacks from the outside. So, and it also makes sense for the original downtown to be over here, because it's right next to the old, whatever this cultural, shared, religious, heritage, whatever you call it, site is. Okay, so maybe the original fort is so dinky. Maybe it's like this tower here, basically. So that's a little location where they can basically look out. Maybe I can make it a little bit larger. Perfect. A little location where they can just look out for intruders and things like that. And then the brunt of the city area should just be a lot of really nice, little, cute, interesting shops, I think. Maybe to divide this part from this part, I can build like a hill, basically. So to build a hill, yeah, so the topography of the two cities is kind of different. So I'm going to make this a little bit wider, just so it's more realistic that there would be a hill there. Doesn't really make sense for a hill to be right in the middle of an isthmus, like a really thin area of land. It makes sense for a hill to be right in the middle of kind of a bulge of land. So let's make this kind of a bulge, you know, with the hill in the middle. Oh, actually, the hill should probably be a lot of neutral colors, just because it's a hill and not actual building tiles. Oh no, but the ones on the edge, those are actually building squares. So so yeah, those can be red. Maybe over here, there's another kind of shared cultural area, but we'll worry about that later. Okay, so I can maybe say that this orange area is technically a part of the yellow kind of kingdom, and that's the reason that you can see at the top of the hill, the two grids don't line up. So however they were designed, was meant to block travel between the one place to the other. So even though they both kind of ascend to the top of this hill, this area and this area are both totally isolated from each other. Unless you were to go, you know, around the whole side area, which is kind of a pain. Okay, and then I can go, let's see, maybe fill up this area with some other more yellowy colors. Maybe they've got a row of towers, like a watchtower type of thing, along this direction. Looks kind of nice. But otherwise, their buildings are pretty small. Their buildings are just these one-story, you know, cheap, not very dense. Cool. I like how also these two subtly different shades of yellow, when they come together, you can see a line on the roof. So you can make a lot of buildings that are still clearly their own building, but you can have them all right next to each other. Like these three, for example, it's the more orangey yellow, the greener yellow, and the more orangey yellow all right up to each other, but they still have this house in between. Perfect. And then this gross color, kind of this gross darkish green. That can be kind of the intermediate area between yellow and this green area. Yeah, perfect. So let's see, how can that get implemented? You know, it's pretty similar to these other yellows, so I might even add it to this section a little bit more. And then the green style, that can still be low. Yeah, that can still be low, and then it'll increase in height later on. Back into this more limey green color over here. And you know, let's say because these people are so isolated and clearly this area is so important to them, their you know, connection to the mainland, maybe they have a better relationship with the Yellow Kingdom, and so there's an easier traffic between the two places. So unlike on the top of this hill, where the two, you know, neighborhoods are totally exclusive of each other, over here they kind of flow into each other. So if this road were to continue, it would go like this, like this, like this. Okay, so that's where it would go, and then let's build buildings around that to kind of get that traffic sustained, I guess, or support that traffic. Yeah, and so maybe the border between the yellow and the green is a little bit more blurred, just because they're more, you know, cooperative. It's probably here where the two-story buildings start, just because there's some kind of cultural difference there. But basically, that's kind of how it goes here. Okay, and then as the green kind of bleeds over to this blue area, it should turn to a more, well, you know, maybe these people are isolated just because there's no city here. Just because it's kind of a green courtyard area that's totally just farm, basically, or just some kind of park or something like that. So let's build a wall around this area, and then this can turn green, and that can really cut off the other part of the city. Oh, and I can just do a garden path through it. Perfect. Awesome. Great. So then the blue part of the city starts there. Let's do a couple of buildings like this. So these people, honestly, they're just more concerned about aesthetics. So maybe, what if this whole section of the city was covered in the wall so that it's all green, and then everyone can have like a nice towering castle in the middle of a green courtyard. That could look really nice. Okay, so let's go back to this color here. Is it this? No, that's too green. One below. And then we'll build a wall. Okay, I really like the way these arches look when they go down to the ground, but when I make them, it destroys the courtyard behind. So what I think I'm going to do, I'll add a second layer behind this castle here. Okay, wow, this is going to be super nice. And then the people who live in this part of the city, they're just living it up. They're super rich. They've got nice courtyards everywhere. It's just courtyards on courtyards on courtyards. Beautiful spires. Just the grandest old houses ever. Now, yeah, it's basically honestly one big extension of this castle, just into the perpetuity. Maybe this right here can be kind of the main road of the whole place. That can be some kind of religious area, like a church or something like that. And across from it can be, and just another building, maybe the rectory or whatever. What if we had a garden path going down all the way through? Oh no, but garden paths don't work if you have a building right adjacent to them. Bummer. Okay, well that's okay. I can just kind of pretend this is a clean area all the way through here. And then I can end in a staircase just so it maintained the asphalt right up all the way up to there. Why is this not a roof? Oh, it's probably because of this. Shoot. No, I wish I could change that, but can I even do that? Yeah, I can. I'll just add this right there. That should solve it. Awesome. Okay, perfect. That solved it. Great. Okay, so then the road goes back that way. Oh, and this should be a courtyard as well. So the color scheme. Maybe they have a nice white building. They kind of have the ability to go against the color scheme if they want. And then they've got another white building there. It's gonna be like public. I don't even know what you call them. Maybe like outhouses or something. Some kind of publicly used space. And then maybe these towers can get moved forward, just so they don't make staircases. Perfect. Okay, that worked. And then the entrance should have something special. Just because you can't have too many special things in this part of town. These people they're really living large. Okay, sweet. Oh, but then I don't really like this. I want to fix this area over here, so I can do that. Nope, that wouldn't work. Great. Okay. So, and then maybe they can have access to this. So this is kind of, they have this harbor. These people maybe historically guarded it, but now these people have control. So maybe they built like a little guardhouse just to cement their control over it right over here. Just to stick it in these people's face that they have access to it and they don't. And so there can be a dock maybe going out from this arch right here. I like how they've got this door on this side, so let's move the dock on the other side. A dock going straight out, and these people have boats and whatnot. Maybe there's a path going to that house right there. Awesome. Okay, so then now onto this area. This area is the green area. And what should the characteristics of this place be? It's very isolated. It has, one connection, one trading connection to the rest of the city. So, hmm, maybe it's big on fishing. I guess that makes sense. Maybe there can be little like islands around it, just not really houseboats, but kind of just fishing, I guess, fishing areas where people live and fish. They can be identical. They can each have one little pier on the end. Like that, perfect. And then maybe in the middle there's a big fish processing factory. Yeah, right in this kind of square, or maybe in this square area. Hmm. How about, what? Oh, maybe it should be long. Okay, yeah, it's long. It's a nice long factory building. It should even be green. I could even make it a different color. Maybe the bottom should be a more solid color, like this dark color, and then the top can be green. And it can go all the way across the edge of this map, or the edge of this island. So the bottom is green like this. Or the bottom is sorry, the bottom is not green. The bottom is this beige color, and then I can make it thinner. Yeah, thinner, and the top is green, just to match the roofs of the rest of the neighborhood. Perfect. Okay, so that definitely dominates this island. So this is kind of the political center, this is kind of the economic center, and then the houses are kind of just scattered around on these little islands over here, like this. Maybe not make it a tower. Okay, and then so the road kind of curves around like this, and then connects to the end of the fish processing plant. And that's where the stuff comes out this door, and then they can kind of come down this road. And then on the road, that's where all the commercial buildings are. So this is the tallest part of the city. Maybe it's got some nice buildings like this. And then just to make it so that they don't all merge together, I can, let me throw in some different shades of green. It doesn't totally fit with the gradient that I've established already, but honestly, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. Yeah, that's fine. Just so I get some difference. This area, if it has a factory this big and a fort this big, I really can't have this few houses, especially if these ones are more like shops. So maybe I should really lean into the whole island thing. Yeah. So let's have some more islands on the side. And maybe this is a dock, so that all the people who are, coming in from the other areas of these islands, they have their own private little fishing operations on each one. They can kind of take their fish in here to the central processing plant, and then it kind of gets organized and then sorted, and then it gets sold to the rest of the whole economy of the rest of the area. It's going to be a little central feature, maybe a tall tower like this. Like that, okay. And then let's see, can I make more? Should I make more islands? Yeah, I might as well. And then as we're kind of getting closer to the yellow area, maybe we can switch colors too, back to the more yellowish green. Not quite the drab, ugly green yet, but just the yellowish one. Great, so I think that's done for the green area. And then, oh, I never finished the red part. How did I not do that? Okay, let me quickly finish that area. So this is the old downtown. It's got maybe a mixture of these kind of magenta and red buildings really close together, just to kind of give it a really old towny vibe. And let's just say this is the most populous part of the island. So this place is super crowded. There's a lot of really kind of tall buildings, really right rammed up against each other. Perfect, okay. So that's done with the green area. And then it looks like between the yellow area and the red area, or sorry, done with the red area. Then between the red area and the yellow area, there's kind of this neutral section. So maybe a little bit similar to this part of the map over here. This can be a more neutral zone. So what building would be here? I could use a neutral color, like this kind of darkish shade, and then build. What should I build? Maybe could it relate to this pier in some way? Maybe it isn't neutral. Maybe it's still part of the yellow area, but it's just something different. It's just a big hotel, a big waterfront hotel. I feel like I'm always building waterfront hotels that have a nice dock at the end so that guests can pull up. But I don't know. I think I like the idea of that. Being able to pull up your boat right to a really nice hotel and then being able to stay in it. Sounds like pretty cool. I mean, you have to have a boat first, which is obviously, super expensive, but once you have that, you can go to all these hotels and do that kind of thing. That kind of competes with this fort over here, and I don't really like that. So I'm going to make this smaller, a lot smaller. And, maybe I should just make it neutral. Not even a hotel. These people are always fighting, so why would there be any visitors to this place? Also, if they're going to visit, you're going to visit this section, which is nicer and more peaceful. So, okay, what should be here? I can go maybe some kind of war monument or something. Yeah, so it's not like a religious area, but it's like a kind of shared political values, or maybe it's some kind of historic. Maybe this is like where the settlers or whoever first landed when they came to this place, and this is their first settlement here. And then when they realized this is a horrible part of the island to be on because it's right on the open ocean, then they kind of moved over here and built a more permanent settlement over here. But this is the oldest part. Because it's so old, that's why the buildings are kind of unpainted. Maybe the paint's worn off. Like that. Perfect. And then just to block it off from the red section so that people can't walk through. Let's go like this and reduce that by 1. And then at the end of here, there can be some kind of memorial, like monument or anything like that, or something like that. Maybe this part, even with the dock, even with the pier here, it's still too choppy to be any kind of economic zone. Like there's no fishing or anything, no access to the water. You can still have a nice feature that pokes out just as much as, the blue fort over here. And so this can be just like a nice monument type of thing. Okay. So now I think I'm ready for the moment of truth. I think I'm ready for the big religious zone over here. Maybe this can be like a cult type of thing. Not a cult type of thing, but like a monastery or something. Something kind of weird. Something out of the ordinary. So maybe it's got kind of this fishbone structure. Or maybe they worship fish. That's weird. But maybe they're kind of like a... I don't even know what you'd call it. But I guess they're like... Maybe they think that fish have some kind of special religious significance. Or fish do have some kind of special religious significance in their culture. And so they built this big fishbone shape. And that's where all the priests and stuff live. All the fish priests. Oh, yeah, okay. I like how it makes these little spires right here on the intersections of the different sections of the building. And then, should I leave it like that? No, I should probably have something that stands out a little bit more. Something kind of castle-y. Let's build maybe some towers over here. Not a courtyard, but a big square of buildings. Whoa, that is weird. Could I build further out like this? Too crazy. Whoa. That's pretty hardcore. And it's got this dome underneath it. But then it kind of loses the fish shape. I kind of like the idea that they built the whole thing in the shape of a big fish. So, okay, so let's remove these towers here. Maybe keep them so it continues with that weird side arch thing. Like that. And then there's a tower at the end, and that's got some significance. But something about this just doesn't feel complete. You know, maybe a big tower in the middle. Didn't just do that though? Yeah, I just did that. And it's an older part of the city, so they probably didn't have the technology to build that high. So this area is probably the highest they can go, and it's kind of their biggest achievement type of thing. And maybe there's an area on the side where they can meditate and stuff. So maybe that's another island. Or maybe it's just even, you can kind of continue the fishbone. That's what I should do. I should make the fishbone a more obvious, more prominent feature on this. All the way through, not just in the middle, or on the end. Looks good. And then this area, maybe right behind the fort, there's some kind of meditation place. Symmetrical, just because it's good to have symmetrical things. What if it's like fishing meditation? Never heard of that, but that could be kind of interesting. Like, instead of going out and praying or looking up at the sky or doing all sorts of stuff like that, they just go out here and fish in the middle of this courtyard. Like, maybe they raise some kind of special, rare sea creatures and they just fish out of here. That's a kind of a weird idea, but it could be cool. Maybe just delete this, just so it remains symmetrical. Right in the back of that fort right there. Wow, that's a weird religious space. But who am I to judge? I wonder, am I allowed to judge if I'm the one who made it? Anyway. Okay. Wow. That looks great. So now I think it's time for the grand tour. Okay, so we start out at the overview, and we see that this is a very, very complex map. You've got kind of this central area, this central island, with this peninsula on the end, connected just by this really small bridge, this little isthmus right here, and then there's this kind of fishbone shape off to the side, very symmetrical, very nice, with a fort right next to it and a temple attached. Now, I'm kind of imagining that this is maybe one country, but it's made of a bunch of different states that at one point, or maybe even currently, were at war. And so each area is very different in terms of its development and has kind of its own character. And so we'll go a little bit into that right now. So we start out with the red area. The red area, I'm imagining, is kind of the oldest one of these states in the city. It's not the oldest inhabited area. This is the oldest inhabited area, this little colony museum place. But this is the oldest one of the states. And so it's very crowded. It's got these very tall buildings that are magenta and red. Not magenta. Is that magenta? Kind of maroon? Plum? I think plum is the word that I usually use to describe that. But anyway, they've got these really, really tall, skinny buildings like this. The street grid is not super linear. Kind of tangles around, I guess, a bunch of alleys, things like that. And then they kind of blend into this fort right here. And the fort has got this platform on top so that it can shoot at enemies. It's also got this area here with the, the 4 stars have this, or the 4 sides, or I guess it's 5 stars. How many sides are there? It looks like there's 6, but there's only 3 that are exposed. So the 3 points here are where cannons would go, and that's kind of used to defend not just this part of the city, but just this part of the island as a whole. And then at the tip, you've got maybe this lighthouse or some kind of religious building or something. This is probably the oldest building in this section of the island, this part of the city. I'm kind of imagining that after this was created, this state, when this was created, it had kind of a downtown surrounded on this peninsula here, just because it's so close to whatever activities were going on right there. And then as they expanded backwards, oh, actually, it used to be a fort. That's what I remember it being. This was the original fort, so it's super, super small. And then as they expanded backwards, then they had room, or they didn't have room, but then they I guess, had the economic ability to build a big fort like this. Okay, and then you got this hill right here. It's a pretty small hill. It's only 1 story, but you can see it separates pretty well the red section from the yellow section. Now between the red section and the yellow section, by the way, I'm imagining the orange is part of the yellow section. You can see that it looks like the street grade would kind of go over the hill and continue on the other side, but maybe the yellow people or maybe the blue people, basically they built houses in the middle of the street just to prevent the motion from one side of the, actually, let me make this red, just to prevent the motion from the movement, excuse me, from one side of the island to the other. They really, these people probably have the worst relationship of any of the two groups in the island. These are kind of the two big powerhouses here, just in terms of size, and so they really don't get along, and that's why there's no pathway between them, except barely kind of on the edge, and maybe through the neutral kind of original settlement area. So this is the original settlement, kind of imagining like Colonial Williamsburg or Jamestown or something like that, where you've got, maybe it's a replica, maybe it's the real thing, but basically a bunch of really, really old looking buildings that are kind of in the style that they were when they first came. So it's very, very simple, not really towers, turrets, not anything crazy like that. And maybe it's just kind of a historical, shared cultural area, which is why it's open to both the yellow people and the red people. And then at the very end of the pier, there's some kind of monument. Maybe it's a monument to the lost colonists or whatever. But that's what this is. It's a newer building. It's not an old building like the ones over here. It's just kind of a more modern monument to them. And then in the yellow section, you've got the fort in the middle. You can see the fort is a very different style than the fort over here. This fort's very symmetrical. It's got these 4 towers. It's not in the water like this one is. It's kind of in the middle of its part of the city, and it's surrounded by individual houses that are all very low. So you can see when you look at the profile. Actually, it's better to look at this angle. When you look at the profile, you can see that these houses in the yellow area are generally shorter than the ones in the red area. So it's a lot less crowded in there. Maybe the population's a little bit lower, but all the people here kind of have their own separate house area, right, like this. And the only area that's pretty crowded is the orange area, probably because it has some kind of cultural exchange with the red area over here, which is why the buildings are like this. Or maybe maybe these used to be red buildings, but they were since taken over by the yellow people, and they tried to paint it yellow, but couldn't quite go over the red, and so it turned kind of orange. Whatever way you want to imagine it, that's this neighborhood right here. And then on the side of the yellow, I have these 3 towers, and then these 3 towers, all kind of representing the diversity. Maybe I can make this orange. Kind of representing the diversity within the yellow part of the empire. I think the yellow has the most colors within it. It's got this orange. It's got the more yellow or more orangey yellow. It's got the more greenish yellow. Then it's got kind of this gross greenish color, all kind of contained within it. So this is the most, I guess, multicultural area of the map. And then next to it, you've got the entrance to the green area. I'm kind of imagining that the green area is really focused on fishing. And so most of the people, some of them live on the peninsula right here, but most of them live in these small little like fishing colonies off the main shore area. They produce whatever they produce, take it over to this dock on their boats, and then it gets processed at this big fish factory right here, kind of an ugly, long, functional looking building. And then it kind of comes out here, out this side, out this door that you can see on this end, and then down this main street. The main street is kind of the main commercial area of the Green District, which is why there are so many buildings crowded along the edge of it. And then it comes through to the fort. The fort is really important because unlike the other section of the city that I've already gone through, where the fort's kind of near the center of the main area of the neighborhood, this fort is on the end. It's pretty far away from everything else. That's because it has to defend the access to the mainland, because these people depend on their ability to sell fish to all the people over here. There's no docks on this side of the island, so it's hard for any of the fish to get to the mainland, if not through this dock right here. And so that's why this fort is so important, to kind of guard this area. And then another kind of aspect of this is that they have a really good relationship with the yellow people. Because they're not they're self-sufficient food-wise, but they really need to connect to the economy of the main area of the island. And so they've tried to maintain a good relationship with the yellow people, which is why there's not like a big wall here or big separation. It's why there's a really nice gradient going between the yellow and the green, and there's even some yellower islands in the green area too. And then, as you go in this direction, these are the blue people. The blue people are more chilled out. I think they're probably a lot richer. They are not super territorial. They just kind of want to live in their own little bubble, not worry about the rest of the island. They're pretty separated from everyone else. Their land is not super contested because it's not, there's no port area. I mean, there's this harbor here, but there's no like docks on the outside. I'm kind of imagining that the mainland of other countries are over here, and so this is right in the open ocean. It's not a super desirable location, but the people there have somehow made a name for themselves. Maybe they've got like great STEM or something, I don't know. But anyway, they're super rich, they're pretty isolated, they're not really at war. That's why their fort is more beautiful. It's kind of there for aesthetic purposes, tourists, rather than as a big functional thing. You can kind of imagine it doesn't really make sense to have a huge, super, super tall, skinny tower like this if you want to defend your building. If you want to defend, you'd want to have a more kind of stout area with a big, chunky lower bottom. Maybe a tower, but that tower is clearly there to be a lookout area rather than an aesthetic thing. But this area is totally aesthetic. That's why it's got these symmetrical arches right down to the water. Very beautiful. And then it's got this main street going down the center of this neighborhood. Alongside the street are these courtyards, which have maybe big, maybe small houses, but they're all pretty nice. They all have access to green space. So these people are all pretty content. They've got this church right here, which you can tell because it's got these two spires right next to each other. And then if they all want to go out boating, they've got this dock right here. Kind of imagining this dock is not really a functional thing the way the fishery is. It's not really an economic feature. It's more of a recreational feature. And so all these people have like yachts and stuff parked on this area over here. And then between the blue area and the green area or the yellow area, they've got a courtyard separating them. So clearly they just got some distance between them and everybody else. They're kind of unbothered, happy, living in their own little bubble. They're happy. And then finally, I want to get to this area, which is probably the weirdest part of the whole map. I'm kind of imagining this is a shared cultural space of the whole nation, which is why it's not one specific color, also why nobody is really fighting over it. They kind of leave it be. I'm kind of imagining it's like a religious space or something. These people being on an island, they all probably care about the ocean and the fish industry, even though the green neighborhood is the center of fishing. Is probably pretty important to all of them, or at least the fish is maybe an important symbol of their, I don't know, dependence on the sea. So they built this big fish-shaped temple building with kind of a weird, funky-looking arch, very complex geometry, architecture. They're very proud of it, basically. And that's right there. Actually, that looks good. So now there's like an open square area here. And then to guard it, they've got this fort here. This fort's kind of an old fort. Probably doesn't get that much use, so it's pretty small. Not super showy. Just very, very practical, very, very functional. But more importantly, on the back of the fort, there's this kind of courtyard area, but instead of there being grass in the middle of the courtyard, there's just a big ocean area, a big pit. So maybe these people kind of raise like specialty fish or rare fish or religious fish or something weird like that. And that's kind of what they use the space for, actually. Looks like I'm going to delete that. And maybe there's also some worshipping relating to the fish there as well. Okay, perfect. So I think that's pretty much, I think it's every single thing I've already covered. So now it's time for the rating. This build definitely gets a plus for the colors. I really love how, especially when you view it from an angle, let's see, what's the best angle to see the colors? An angle like this, you can really see a really great gradient going through the whole map. So I'm definitely really, really proud of that. I'm also proud of the backstory. I think I've done a lot of cities where there are different neighborhoods and they have different kind of positive or negative relationships with each other, but this is the first time that I've really gone into fleshing out really, really unique neighborhoods. Like, it's super obvious that this area is distinct from this area and this area is distinct from this area, just based on the height of the buildings, the style of the buildings, how close they are, whether there's courtyards, green space, islands, things like that. I think I really effectively made different neighborhoods. It also gets a plus for kind of having an interesting religion, being based off of fish, and so the whole thing is in the shape of a fish spine. I don't really have any other reason for that other than it looks kind of cool. But it's kind of a cool backstory. Also gets a plus for these little islands here. I think it's cool how there are these little fishing villages that all maybe have their own mini community on them, but they're linked to the larger community here, which in turn is linked to the larger community of cities or nations or whatever you want to call them on this big island over here. So it's kind of got that cool 3 levels of locality. I would say it gets a negative for the way the religious space looks. I mean, it looks cool as a fishbone, but I mean, it's probably too big to be a religious space for this small of an island. Maybe I could say it's a religious space for the whole of this, universe that I've created, so out of this island as well. But it's probably a little bit too big. It also doesn't really look like a traditional mosque or a church or a temple or whatever. So it's definitely a weird situation. And then I also get a minus for not making enough use of this harbor right here. I built this pier in the middle, this kind of fish chicken bone shaped pier, to kind of suggest that these people maybe have yachts or something on it. But I think I probably could have made it more of an economic zone, maybe by closing it off a little bit more, having some docks in the middle of it. Maybe it would be kind of a secondary fishing area or something like that. And so, for all these reasons, this build gets a pretty strong 7.
Well, that's it, folks. Thanks for listening.